How to Pay for the Green New Deal by Yeva Nersisyan and Randall Wray. The Big Meow. Can we afford the costs of avoiding annihilation? We must approach the Green New Deal as the real meow, the moral equivalent of war, as opposed to Jimmy Carter's baby kitten meow, his moral equivalent of war on inflation, that saw the inflation sparked by OPEC's price hikes as an existential threat to American democracy. Climate change really does threaten the very existence of human life on this planet. But advocates of the Green New Deal recognize that this is not the only threat we face, as discussed in the introduction. To be sure, some naysayers reject science. Others claim we just cannot afford to mount the effort required to reverse humanity's steady march to oblivion. We will just have to settle for small, incremental change and hope for luck or divine intervention to supplement our meager efforts. Or look to colonization of Mars as a way to preserve a select few representatives of this civilization of Homo sapiens in a human zoo, waiting for discovery by more advanced life forms that manage to avoid self-annihilation. How can we possibly weigh the costs of failure against the financial costs of the greatest effort we could mount to give us some chance of survival? Even very small increases of average global temperatures will generate large financial and human costs. Just a half of 1 degree of warming above today's average will increase the cost of global damages by $54 trillion. Carter and Kaufman, 2019. As we delay action to prevent this, the costs mount rapidly, and the chances of survival diminish. It is usual in economics to discount avoided future costs, in this case the cost of delaying action, to compare with today's costs, spending on a Green New Deal. But that makes little sense in the case of climate change. The cost of extinction of the human species, from the point of view of humans at least, is beyond measure. Even if we calculate the costs of the Green New Deal as $93 trillion, as one hysterical estimate puts it, over the next decade, this is puny in comparison with the discounted cost of total destruction of human life on planet Earth. Some would quibble that we are not absolutely certain that climate change will extinguish all human life. Perhaps some humans and other life forms could adapt sufficiently to survive cataclysmic change. The uncertainties involved are tremendous, greater than any ever faced by humans, at least since they came out of Africa. Even with our best efforts, we might fail, but why would we mount our best efforts? A more prudent approach is to listen to science and to map out a strategy that would provide some chance of survival even under the worst climate change scenario. If we think about America's biggest challenge over the past century, it is reasonable to point to the combination of the Great Depression and the rise of global fascism in the 1930s. To counter those, we created the New Deal and ramped up military strength. The economic cost of lost employment and output during the 1930s was huge. The benefits of New Deal programs that helped to get the economy back on track almost certainly exceeded the spending on those programs. But we have to admit that we cannot accurately tally up the net benefits gained because we cannot know how the economy would have recovered in the New Deal's absence. In any event, most would agree that it was prudent to tackle the crisis rather than wait any longer, even if we cannot be sure of the net ex post benefits of action over inaction. War spending plus the New Deal reforms led to an unprecedented increase in the size of the government and its deficit. Government spending reached a peak of half of GDP, and the deficit reached 26% of GDP in 1943, Spross, 2016. Can we compare that to the alternative, which might have been global domination by fascism, including elimination of the United States and Western democracy? It was only World War II that freed the government's budget on the necessary scale. This was justified on the basis that there was no alternative, either global subjugation to Nazis or whatever it takes to borrow a phrase, spending. We choose survival. We learned that taxes for revenue are obsolete, as Beardsley Rummel, 1946, put it. And we came out of World War II stronger and richer than ever before. Some of this was thanks to the New Deal institutions, as well as the infrastructure created in the run-up to war. Some of it was due to industrial might created by the war machine, and some of it was due to the good wages and benefits on which economic growth could be sustained after the war. It is preposterous to think that we should have just surrendered in order to forego the financial cost of war. The task ahead of us is bigger. The stakes are higher. The future of humanity lies in the balance. Half measures will not do. It might take all of our available resources, and then some, to win this battle. The experts say we have most of the technology we need. We have unused resources to put to use. We can shift others from destructive uses to be engaged in constructive endeavors. We can mobilize the population for greater effort with the promise of greater equality and a shared and sustainable prosperity. We can make a good effort. We might win. First, we have to shake off the neoliberals, who have been destroying our country and our world for more than 2 generations. They began in 1974 with the argument that an overspending government caused inflation and that too much regulation and coddling of unions caused unemployment and slow growth. In reality, OPEC caused both of our high inflation periods, early and late 1970s, and the adoption of austerity to fight oil price hikes slowed growth and led to unemployment, which, together with inflation, was known as stagflation. Union busting weakened our middle class. Real wages stagnated, and we entered an era dubbed secular stagnation. Deregulation, especially of finance, led to bubble and bust cycles that redistributed income and wealth to the tippy top, while the bottom 90% was buried in debt. The correct policy then, and now, was conservation and conversion to alternative energy sources. Instead, we got austerity and ramped up dependence on climate-killing carbon. Neoliberals want to continue with the same old policies: more fiscal austerity, more reliance on markets, carbon trading, that is, using the price system to try to resolve a problem created by the price system, more half measures, and more of President Carter's MEOW. At least part of the justification for half measures is the Green New Deal is just too expensive. Our government is already broke. We simply cannot afford survival. But MMT teaches that financial affordability is not the question. We can afford the real MEOW. We already have the financial wherewithal needed to afford whatever is technologically possible. We do not need to go hat in hand to rich folks to get them to pay for it. We do not have to beggar our grandkids to pay for it. We do not have to borrow from China to pay for it. We do not have to get the Fed to print money to pay for it. All we need to do is to remove the self-imposed constraints, the myths, and the misplaced morality. Then budget for it, approve the budget, and spend. No new spending process is required. Follow the normal procedures that the Fed and Treasury have developed. That is how you pay for it. As the great J. Fogg Foster, 1981, said, quote, Whatever is technologically possible is financially feasible." End quote. There is really no other reason to have a financial system. If you know how to build houses, but your financial system cannot find a way to make them affordable, then you must replace that system with one that will. Footnote 1. We did that with the New Deal's creation of the self-amortizing mortgage loan and associated institutions, the Federal Housing Administration, the Federal National Mortgage Association, and the Homeowners Loan Corporation. Wall Street's 21st century model created a financial system that put housing out of reach for average Americans. We need Jimmy Stewart. End footnote. It is possible that we will need to constrain domestic consumption in order to release resources for the Green New Deal effort in a non-inflationary manner. The problem is not that we cannot financially afford the Green New Deal. Government can always bid resources away from private use by paying higher prices. But spending on the Green New Deal will generate private income that can support higher bids in competition with the government for scarce resources. This is the real reason that tax hikes might be desirable, to reduce private income and thereby remove competition for resources.